Okay, so we all know the Askr trio aren't exactly good in many capacities. Their competition's too stiff, lack of merges, so on and so forth. You get the gist. They aren't great, but they are usable. To what extent? We'll find out. Today, I'm here to answer one question. Can the Askr trio clear Book 1 on Lunatic? I think it's fair to say that nowadays, the Askr trio are doing a lot better than they were back then, simply because of the amount of skills that we have access to now, in comparison to back in, 2018, 2019, even 2017? So, they definitely have a leg up in comparison now, so they do have that going for them. However, to make this interesting, we are going to set some ground rules. The whole goal is to see whether or not the Askr trio can clear the map, so losing any of them is going to be a big no-no. The goal here is to make sure that we can beat every single Book 1 Lunatic map with all of them alive. And before I go any further, the Askr trio only make up for 3 of the 4 slots. So, to make up the 4th slot, we're going to be using the original free unit Virion. We did also get a free Ray and a free Matthew, but I feel like to keep it more interesting, we're not going to switch between them and we're just going to keep Virion. Now, we are still going to be able to use these new sorted weapons and whatnot, because to limit ourselves to just whatever they had initially back in 2017 doesn't really make any sense, especially through the perspective of, well, can they do it? And if they have the tools to do it, why limit it? So, PRFs and refines and inheritable weapons and skills, all on the table. Even Sacred Seals. And beyond that, there's not really much else to it. Basically, we're just going to see if it's possible for them to clear every single Book 1 Lunatic map. Now, I am going to preface this by saying the first 8 chapters are going to be pretty easy, simply because most of the units up until a certain point are not even level 40 or even 5-star. So a lot of them aren't going to be doing anything to a lot of these units, as you'll see in a bit. But anyway, let's go over the kits real quick. For Alphonse, I have his PRF with a defense refine. I initially was going to go with Triangle Adept, but I do think that the defense is going to help him out a lot more than taking the Triangle Adept, simply because if there are foes that we need to tank that target his defense and are blue, the Triangle Adept is going to work against us, even if we have triple brazen attack defense. And then outside of that, I only have Dull Close and Attack Smoke just for more general tanking. There's not really much else I figured I'd give him, so I'm just going to stick with these skills mainly. And then Ignis just for extra hard-hitting special damage. And that's Alphonse. For Sharena, I have a Stout Lance set with Steady Stance 3, Quick Riposte, Attack Smoke again, and Attack Defense form. So basically capitalizing on her okay-ish defense and making her into a melee tank, which will actually help us out in quite a bit of situations. Then I have Anna with Unbound Axe, Double Fury, Desperation. You know, the classic 2017 set that everybody still loves even to this day, mainly just me. I figured skills like these could help bolster her overall magic tanking, as well as just damage output. So for that reason, I figured Double Fury with Desperation wouldn't be too bad. And then finally, I have Virion with the minus HP plus attack IV set. You know, the best set you can have for a weapon that relies on having a high HP stat. That being said, I gave him double HP plus 5 to make up for that, and Poison Strike just for extra chip damage. I didn't feel like I really needed to give him much else because Virion's really not going to be the star of the show. Well, maybe he'll be the star of the show. But I figured since he's just going to be the backline support and maybe some chip bot damage, he's not really going to need much beyond that. So that's Virion. And these are the 4 units we'll be rocking with today. So, without further ado, we may as well get started with Chapter 1. Like I mentioned earlier, the early chapters are going to be really easy, simply because not only are they not level 40, but they lack a bunch of stats. They're 3-star, 4-star. Most of them aren't even 5-star, which means sweeping these maps are going to be really easy. I can send in Sharena, Alphonse, Virion to take magic hits. Even with 13 res, he's going to do fine against these foes, so it's not going to be a big problem. So a lot of this is just going to be going over my overall experience with the first couple of chapters. Basically, I can send any and every single one of these units against any sort of these foes, simply because, again, they outstat them. So like I'm having Sharena, Alphonse, and Anna one-shot all these units simply because, again, they outstat them. Virion is taking magic hits from Odin and Leo. Well, Odin doesn't really have a lot of attack to begin with, so it's not like it matters anyway. But these first maybe 6-7 chapters are going to be really, really easy. If anything, some of these maps were a bit obnoxious just because of the layout. I could go in with Anna and Varian to snipe, and Alphonse just to tank hits, so it's not really too bad. The stats, again, it's not really going to make too much of a difference. Even if I mess up at times by not reading the skills, I won't really get punished simply because they're not going to be able to kill me without a certain amount of output. But it is going to get to a point where damage output and damage taken is going to increase, especially for Varian since his bulk isn't exactly the highest. But for the time being, he can simply act as a chip bot, he can output a significant amount of damage, and he shouldn't really struggle on that front whatsoever. But we are going to get to this point where maybe Varian and Sharena are not going to be able to kill. Anna is probably going to fall off a bit, simply because her attack isn't exactly the best to begin with. I will say that these stat changes are going to be more noticeable around Chapter 5, where Varian actually struggles to double Saizo. And even though 31 speed isn't exactly the highest, the fact that they're still not 5-star level 40s, he's still not really going to be able to double whatsoever, which is kind of concerning, especially this early in. Something else I also noticed is that Dignified Bow isn't really going to be taking effect whatsoever in a lot of cases, simply because turns out a lot of these maps don't really use visible buffs. The first instance I noticed this in was in the Matthew chapter with Sarah, who had Hone Attack. I believe it was Hone Attack or Hone Speed, but even with that being the case, there was still a lack of visible buffs to go around, so he wasn't really getting much use outside of just chip damage. And just something to note too, after that Matthew chapter, there was this one really annoying map, you know, the one with the breakable walls and everybody is just like boxed in, you know, like Nino and the sword fighter and everybody. It's annoying, it took a while, I did not want to spend that time doing that, but I did, because content! Anyway, what I also didn't do, which I should have been doing, especially early on, was read skills. Because turns out, Hector has Wings of Mercy in one of the later chapters, and it actually scared the shit out of me because I thought Varian was gonna die. I chipped the bow unit with Varian, and what ended up happening was he didn't kill, and Hector swooped in and almost killed Varian. But we also noticed that damage output from enemies are getting significantly higher in the later chapters, so we do have to watch out for that more and more, especially in the Awakening chapters, which is actually where the difficulty curve starts to go up a bit. This is where all the units start becoming level 40, their damage output is significantly higher, they're not eating as many hits, Gaius actually doubles, and while that's fine, I accidentally left Alphonse in a position where he gets doubled by Robin and dies. So, yay, I lost Alphonse, I guess, but I could always reset the chapter and it wasn't too big of a deal, and we're still able to clear that. We move on to chapter 9, and we're still able to do a hefty amount of stuff, but then we get to these armors that just tank everything. Anna can't really output damage, mainly because of the fact that Wary Fighter and she wasn't really solo, so I had to rely on Sharena for that damage output. But there's another instance where I didn't read skills again, and there was a drag back armor, which absolutely caught me off guard. I should have been reading these skills again, but I didn't. But even with that being the case, there wasn't really anything too difficult. It was just mainly me playing stupid. Until we get to Chapter 9, Part 4. And this is where the first difficulty spike came in. The goal with this map was to defeat 5 units. There are 2 healers, a bow cav, a swap Brave Axe armor, and Bruno. On paper, this actually doesn't sound too bad, but the problem we ran into here is that Bruno can double pretty much everyone on the map. His damage output's actually significantly high, and even if we try to tank him, our allies get taken out as a result from other foes. Which is why I had to bait them out, because if you don't initiate combat or let them attack you, then they're not going to move. So I had to chip with Varian initially, and I was barely able to take out Bruno with Varian because he had his special ready. But then I ran into another problem. Alphonse cannot take magic damage, So he started dying. So what I had to do then, what I thought I had to do, was, okay, let me attack the armor and debuff with attack smoke. I still died from the other healer. So what I figured, okay, Varian has a lot of HP. He can take a hit, right? If he killed that healer, I would have been so screwed. But after trials and tribulations, I was able to clear my first difficulty spike, which was great, because now I can go on to the final map, and it wasn't actually too bad. I could tank the left side with Alphonse, and Sharena and Varian and Anna could take on the rest of the enemies on the other side. And that was pretty much all of 1 through 9, which is fine on paper, right? That wasn't like the worst of it. Like, in retrospect, it wasn't too bad. But then we get to Chapter 10 with defend maps, turn limits, and enemy reinforcements. So this is where everything starts going uphill in difficulty. The first map, honestly, wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Initially, I could just set up on the bow with Alphonse and get his Brazens going so he can tank the entirety of the left side, as long as there isn't magic. So what I had to do initially was bait out the mages on the right side, tank with Sharena, and take out Soren with Anna. Anna's biggest contribution to this team is the fact that she could just eat magic hits, which is super beneficial in a book where a lot of these units are not hitting as hard as they should be. Which is fine, because at the end, I was able to survive because of Alphonse, Anna, and Sharena's teamwork. Part 2 wasn't too bad, it was mainly just a take out all the enemies map, so I didn't really have to worry about much there. But then we get to part 3, which is another defend map. And this wasn't too bad either, in my opinion, because Bruno doesn't move as long as you don't get in his range, which he honestly was probably the biggest threat here. Titania does move, but if you could bait her out and make sure she doesn't initiate on any other unit, then she's just going to keep attacking Alphonse on the left side, which is perfectly fine. Miss can keep attacking Sharena, and we can stall out the turns, and we pretty much win there. Then we get to another defend map. And this is basically another setup sort of thing where we set up on Soren and Varian. Varian can take out the mage, while Alphonse can take out Soren with his triple brazen effect. And at that point, we really don't have to worry about taking too many hits. We just have to camp up in the top side, and we should be good to go as long as they can't reach. Which they don't. But then, we get to our next difficulty spike. We have to defeat Ike, Titania, Mist, Soren, and a Lance Cav in 6 turns. Which, in retrospect, is pretty generous. It's actually pretty generous. What I was able to do initially was just throw Alphonse in and kill Titania, barely, and just set up on Ike. And everything seemed good so far, right? Attack smoke debuff on Mist, she doesn't have any attack. Alphonse is barely living, but he can take an Ike hit, but he can't take a Mist hit because he has no res. So, I had to fall back. And that's perfectly fine because we saw 3 turns, or actually 4 turns. So I figured here what we could do is go in with Alphonse, take out Ike, have Sharena take a hit or 2, but Sharena can't double. We've gotten to a point where Sharena is not able to double any of her foes, which is great for the damage reduction of Stout Lance, but it wasn't good for actually taking out foes. So I figured, okay, what the hell do I do now? And it hit me. I send in Varian. He can take hits, probably, right? Well, barely. He was barely able to take out Soren with Glimmer, and he barely takes out Mist, which is perfect. Varian, low-key, was the carry this time around. And all is well as ends well, right? Wrong, because now we get to the infamous pair of chapters. Chapter 11 and Chapter 12 of Book 1. For anybody familiar with how brutal these maps were in 2017, it was a flex to show off that, yeah, I cleared these maps, because these maps were difficult. They were really, really difficult. Well, some of them. Chapter 11 doesn't actually start out too bad. Varian can't double for the life of him, and Celica's actually eating a hit pretty well. So what I have to do is bait her out with Sharena, have her take a hit or 2, and honestly, I don't think I would have lived if it wasn't for Stout Lance, so thank you, Rashea. But after that, I was pretty much able to just take out the foes, yada yada yada. We get to part 2, we're doing the same thing, we're baiting out foes. May can't deal damage to Anna all too much, it's perfectly fine, we keep baiting them out. Bowie thankfully, is not fast, so he isn't able to double Sharena, and is able to actually eat a hit quite well. So that part wasn't too bad. But then we get to one of the more infamous maps of Chapter 11. The Defend map with Celica. Your party is split into 2 groups. You have the top half and the lower half, where enemies will swarm on both sides, depending on your position. So for this, I had Ana and Alphonse at the top, Varian and Sharena at the bottom, mainly because of the color advantages. So what I had to do here was hope to God I could beat this. Because I figured if I could beat this, maybe I could beat the rest, right? Sharena's actually not doing too bad initially on her end, simply because she is able to take a hit from Mei and then take out Mei with a bonfire. Varian is then able to actually take out the Pala and the Lance Cav and so on and so forth. Then we get into a situation where we have to get rid of Jenny, but we also can't let these enemies swarm us. If we try to bait her out, she dies. If we do nothing, she dies. So what we had to do here is throw Alphonse and Ana down even more so the enemies start attacking them instead. Sharena was then able to take out Jenny, and they're perfectly safe. At this point, we could basically just run away. And it wasn't actually too bad because Celica can't reach and the Blue Mage can't reach, and Alphonse can just eat a hit from the bow. So we were pretty good there. Then we get to part 4, and this is another instance where I don't read skills. That sword infantry dude, he had lunge. So I died to Mei more than once. But I'm not going to show it more than once because I'll look bad if I do. So what we had to do here was basically just bait out more of these units as much as possible, to the point where we could actually just chip them down and take them out, which is what we do. And so far so good, right? So far so good. But then we get to the infamous Chapter 11 Part 5, where we have to take out Celica, Mei, Jenny, Bowie, and Bruno in 6 turns, while 4 of them are in defense tiles. So you know what I do? I bait them out. Or I try to. Bruno gets baited out. That's perfectly fine. He doesn't do anything to Ana. Thank you, Ana. Ana takes him out on the 2nd turn. No biggie right there. But then we have to figure out what the hell to do from here. Alphonse can't bait out Celica because he'll die. If we try to do anything from this point on, then they'll die, right? I figured, okay, maybe I can just wait this out. Maybe get in with Ana or Sharena afterward, right? They move on turn 3. And then I lost Alphonse and Ana. So after that point, I was like, okay, maybe I just have to wait an extra turn. I can't kill. Alphonse can't double. He's not in brazen range. Varian can't do anything. Mei doubles. Sharena cannot kill. And I'm like, okay, maybe the idea is, maybe I have to just try this map, right? New positioning, I send Ana in, she can take hits, right? She kills Celica, so far so good. And now I just have to survive a couple hits, and I'm like, okay, this seems doable. She dies because of the chip damage. And at that point, I'm like, she needs attack smoke. If she's gonna live this, she needs attack smoke. So I try the same thing again, right? And I don't know what I did differently this time around, but something changed, and I didn't need attack smoke after all. I was able to just take out Celica with Sharena. Varian was able to bait out Jenny and take her out. But then I ran into the issue of Bowie, who is the absolute fucking worst to deal with on the defense tile, right? He can't deal damage to us, which is perfectly great. But we can't deal damage to him because Ana has no attack. So I figured, okay, let's bait him out. Still can't kill because he has too much defense. So the solution was to bait out Bowie with Alphonse and then take him out with Varian. And at that point, we just finished Chapter 11. All that we really have to worry about now is Chapter 12, and then it's smooth sailing from there. But Chapter 12 also has these turn limits, which is not exactly the greatest. The first map isn't too bad. We could just bait out with Alphonse and Sharena. We don't really have to worry about the certain time limit. They can take hits. We're all good, right? 12.2. 4 turns to win. This was actually not as bad as I was thinking it would be, simply because I could go in turn 1 with Sharena, repo Ana in turn 2, tank a hit from Sonya, and then kill. And that's what exactly I do. I bait them out. Same thing with Chapter 12.3. I can tank with Alphonse. Everyone's pretty much attacking defense. We're all good there. Then we get to 12.4, which is probably the next hurdle I run into. I can't bait out anybody with Alphonse or Sharena because they take too much damage. So I have to spend an extra turn sending Ana all the way to the corner so they move, at which point they start moving, which is perfectly fine, right? No biggies from there, no biggies. And it's great because now what I can do is take out Sonya with a bonfire from Sharena and have Sharena tank the rest of the hits and then finish them off from there. But I have to watch out for pass simply because that red mage will snipe Varian or Ana, and that would have been a problem. But from this point on, we can take out the red mage and Leon, and we are good. And then part 5 is actually not bad at all. We get the advantage here because we're on defense tile, so we can actually just bait out everybody. We can bait out with Alphonse, Ana, Sharena. Varian can do chip damage and take out Tobin with like 3 units, and we're good. It's not actually too bad. And for that, we finished Chapter 12. So now all that's left is Chapter 13, and this isn't too bad because there aren't really any turn limit maps. There is one, but it's not really that bad. It's mainly a defend map with pretty open space. We could use Ana to bait out the mages. She can take hits like a boss, and then she is able to take out Bruno. We could sweep in with Varian to take out the red mage, and we are good to go. But then I get to part 2, right? And I'm thinking, okay, Alphonse can take a hit, right? No, he can't. He can't take a hit from an FMD. So what I need to do is take her out with Ana, because Ana can actually double her, which is great. Even with Unbound Axe not being active, at that point I can just have Alphonse and Sharena tank everything and we're good from there. Perfect, right? Defend map. Honestly, the easiest one I had to deal with. The only caveat here was that after turn 3, Black Knight would show up, which means that we have to make sure we take out every single foe before they fall below 50%, because otherwise the Black Knight's going to swoop in. But we didn't have that issue, so we were good on that front. Next we had part 4, which actually wasn't too bad. We could take out everybody with Sharena, Ana, and Varian, and it wasn't too bad at that point. And then we get to the final part with Brave Ike, Black Knight, Bruno, Askr, and Alencia. Ana actually can't double Bruno at this point because he actually has too many stats. So what we had to do was chip with Ana and then take him out with Varian. And Varian was actually barely able to survive because he has HP. At this point we had to bait everybody out, take hits from Ike, chip with Askr, and we take them out. And then at this point, all we have to do is tank from the Black Knight. And that is game. That is book 1 in its entirety. Well, almost its entirety. We do have the other maps, which is just like the refinery stuff, but that's not too bad. We can just chip with Varian, take out stuff with Ana. Alphonse can take a hit from Merrick a couple times, and Seliph. Lind gets taken out by Varian, and Ignis to the face with Seliph. And that, my friends, is the entirety of book 1 with the Askr trio. So, for anybody wondering, yes, it is possible. I'll also admit, this was the easiest of the bunch, simply because the first 8 chapters weren't even against level 40 units, but that's how IS designed it. So, what have we learned here? I don't know. But if you want to see me attempt other books or abyssals or whatever, let me know down below if you're interested in this. With that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.